So hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sinead Says podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Estelle Bingham. Estelle is a spiritual healer, intuitive guide, and author. She's been helping people align with their soul's purpose for over 20 years through energy healing, astrology, and deep emotional work. I have just finished her book and someone sent it to me and it really called out to me. You know what, though? I do feel like when I got it, I didn't know because I get sent a lot of books and I was like, manifest your truest. I get a lot of manifesting books, you know? But then I kind of looked at the back of it and I was like, oh no, this looks very deep and meaningful. And like, I was just so excited to read it. But yeah, the book is very powerful and it's a call to come home to yourself through wisdom, rituals, and real life stories. And Estelle invites us to break free from all our old patterns and step into a life of truth. Some of the notes that I would have written are just the things that I personally, came to mind when I was reading the book. And the first thing that came to mind when I was reading the book was you're so sure of your calling and your source purpose. And I would love to know where that came from because I do know in the book you touched that your mother was also similar to yourself and you knew you had certain gifts, but you seemed really sure of it. And, I myself have this feeling of soul's purpose through me, but like I never know for sure. But when you knew for sure, I was like, oh my God, how does she know for sure?
Oh, wow. Great question, Sinead. Good one to kick off with. Thank you for that one. Yeah, well, I think let's just talk about the journey to that knowing, because of course I'm in my 50s. So that journey, I have journeyed to that. And I began actually having an inkling of my soul's purpose, but really not wanting to embody it actually, because I didn't want to do this. I wanted to do other things, and I did do other things. So I became a TV presenter. I went and did, I was a music journalist. I did all sorts of other things. And I really was sort of running from this almost. But I there was a moment when the privilege of our purpose. So it kind of comes in, and there's a moment where you kind of get out of the way of yourself and just embrace the privilege of your purpose. Because often the thing that keeps us from our purpose is our egos. Our egos, whether we don't want to be doing something or we think we should be doing something else, it's our egos that sort of get in the way of that. So one of the biggest things that happens spiritually, energetically, or wherever you are on your path is this idea of surrendering. So surrendering to our mission. So we have this idea of it. So you've got an idea of it right now and it's happening through you, and allowing that to just unfold, really saying to spirit, to the universe, to God, however that energy stacks up for you, to just say, okay, guide me. And so what we want to do then is just really focus or kind of work on our intuition and listening to our intuition, and allowing our intuition to guide us, because so often our intuition, that little voice inside, will tell us things, and it'll give us red flags about relationships. It will say, I really want, that there'll be this image of something, a vision of something in the future, and you'll be kind of feeling that, but you'll think, how could that possibly be something that I could do? All of these things that the ego says we can't do, and sometimes it's about listening to that inner voice and letting that inner voice guide you, because the guidance is there, and then surrendering to that.
And I'm just interrupting this podcast with an ad from BetterHelp. BetterHelp is our sponsor, and BetterHelp is an online therapy platform. It is the end of Mental Health Awareness Month, so it is so important to talk about mental health, get rid of the stigma, and know that you can get help and support. Reach out to your loved ones and also look after yourself. My mental health has always been so important for me, but I always need to manage it, and I get the help from BetterHelp. BetterHelp will help you understand yourself and help you with tools to manage your mental health. So look after yourself today with 10% off your first month with betterhelp.com/Sinead at betterhelp.com/Sinead. Yeah, I love that. And then the next thing that really came up for me as well was your it was kind of like you started talking about heart meditation and how meditating on the heart creates I think it was photons, and I just dove right into that, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm obsessed. So I started like researching, looking at like everything that happens when you're meditating on your heart, and I find that very interesting because obviously, you know, and I know as spiritual people, it's always very hard to get people to understand the spiritual world. Sometimes you have to bring in that little bit of science to make them sort of surrender, as you say. And that was one thing that I thought would really help. So I remember reading that bit about heart photons, was called to do heart meditation myself, did all the things and took that to my class, and everyone loved that. And it kind of always, I always feel like there's little triggers for me as a meditation teacher. And that was one of the ones that really helped people sink into the belief of heart meditation and what it can do for you. So I would love for you to explain like the power of meditating on the heart for our listeners today.
I love that because it's so true, Sinead. You know, when we think about spirituality and how that sort of the world accepts that, and I think even when you mention the title "Manifest Your True Essence," I mean, we put manifest in there, but really, this is a very sort of powerful book that companions you. It's a deep book, back home to self, and I do that. My work over 20 years has been to do that through the heart. So I learned how to meditate when I was 7, a mantra based meditation. But actually, the heart is so powerful. It's our most powerful piece of kit. So you imagine that it's the first organ to in the body, to form in the body. And yeah, so really what we know about the heart is that it is, in Chinese medicine, it's the emperor organ. It's in, Egyptian times, it was the only organ that was taken into the afterlife. So for millennia, we've understood that the power of the heart, but we have forgotten how powerful it is until recently, when science, it's called cardioneurology, really discovered that the heart has everything that the mind has, that the brain has. So it has neurons, it has neurotransmitters, and it has support cells, and it sends messages to the brain. So, and actually more messages to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, because we imagine the heart is just this, it's just a sort of pump really, but it's not. It's a powerhouse. And not only does it have a memory, but it also has this sort of mystical, really sort of spiritual way of anchoring into ourselves. So what I found in my work is that we go in, we work with the breath, which is what you do in meditation, what we do in meditation. And then we sit in the emotional heart and actually alchemize some of the stories that are held there, because the heart remembers everything, all the heartbreaks, all the rejection, the abandonment, stories from your childhood. But then we go deeper into this place that I've discovered is the spiritual heart, and we anchor into that, and it's a really powerful and deep shift. But it's also just a tweak, and that's what I love about heart meditation and really heart embodied meditation, that you can step into that with this book, is that it's just a tweak, but it works. And it's in my healing work, my healing practice, it's actually just what it does for transformation is really, there are lots of stories in the book about how people have shifted. It's incredible. It's really extraordinary.
Yeah. And like, even when I was looking everything up and what you were talking about in the book, like the photons releasing and all that stuff, and it can actually send signals to other people. So, when we're doing those love and kindness meditations, when we're doing those things, like people can actually pick up that energy from us as well, from the electromagnetic field that we're bringing off. And I love that, because like when you're meditating and you like are doing your love and kindness, or you're sending somebody love and strength, you do always get like a message from someone, or they're thinking about you. It's like this lovely feeling of prayer as well, I guess. So I just loved that whole section on the heart, and I really dove deep into it. But let's just dive right into the book as well, and like what it is that you wanted to do with the book. Like what was its purpose for you, because obviously it's manifest your true essence, but what does that actually mean to you and to the people listening?
Yeah, well, it's that moment of living the authentic life. So, what is your true essence? And really thinking about what it means to live in your authenticity, and feel strong enough and safe enough and courageous enough to do that. So, in the book, the book was really always meant to be a way of, in a really accessible and financially viable way of actually doing, getting involved in a process. So people come to see me, but it's like a series of sessions, and it's standalone. And so you can dive into that book. That's why I really went deep on some of the journaling prompts and the meditations, and to stop and think and reflect in different places, so that you could actually experience a shift. And that's really my intention for this book. My intention for this book is that it opens hearts. Every morning I pray. I've always prayed every morning in my practice that whoever's meant to come to see me comes to see me. So whatever soul, and whether that's press, or whether that's on a podcast, or whether that's, it could be a nurse, it could be a banker. I mean, I see people from all walks of life, all religions, all nationalities, and ultimately, we are part of one humanity, and we share so many of the same. We are interconnected, and that's obviously that we get to that by the end of the book. It's that Ubuntu, you, me, we are one ultimately. But really, it's about that, to get to that understanding, to really get there, we have to open our hearts first, and we have to open our hearts to ourselves. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, how can you show up to yourself more compassionately, with more love, with more understanding? And when we hear that inner critic, when we hear those voices telling us that we're not enough, how can we neutralize and sort of almost welcome that energy in a different way, and then neutralize and alchemize, which alchemize means to turn the base metal into gold. Like, how do we get back to the gold of ourselves? Through the heart. Because the heart, as you know, it holds that vibration. It's a frequency. It holds a frequency of love by default. We're born, it's almost like you can imagine that there's a line, it's an umbilical cord between you, your heart, and spirit, you and God, you and the light, you and the angels, through the heart. It doesn't come through the mind. The mind is a construct of, the brain, and then the mind, our thoughts, are a construct of this lifetime alone. The heart takes us right to the source and brings us to our true essence. And the true essence is really this energy that you arrive in the world with, that part of you before the stories, before some of the traumas that have happened to you, before the shame that you've accumulated from school, or being bullied at school, or teachers, or relationships with siblings, or mum and dad, or whatever it is. These are all souls on the planet that help us grow and evolve. But there's a part of you, there's a spark of you that has come in. You sort of drop into the incarnation as a soul with that wisdom, and we kind of forget because we're meant to forget, but then we get to return, and we return through the heart. And by the way, when you return to your true essence, you activate all of your soul wisdom. And for me, that's like a cosmic DNA, right? So the cosmic DNA, whether you believe in past lives or not, is something that you alone have in your soul. So if you believe in past lives, it's like wisdom that you've accumulated through your past lives. And if you don't particularly believe in past lives, you can just imagine it around that thing of what makes your soul unique. So two sisters can be born into the same family. They have the same experience, but they respond to that experience differently because their soul DNA is slightly different.
Yeah. And even when I was reading the book, like I've done a lot of manifesting in my time, and I pretty much like went to like a limit, I felt, and I was kind of just sailing through this like contentness, but also noticing I was kind of in a bit of a burnout by just working a lot, doing a lot of things. But then when I read the book, I also felt like I was just coming back to myself, because one of the main things about manifesting your true essence is basically sitting down with yourself and your heart in the meditations that you provided in the book, and asking yourself those deeper questions. And deep down, like I say to my own clients as well, like they come at me all the time, like thinking I'm going to give them answers, thinking that I'm going to be the person to say, do this, do that. But it's always deep down in their soul what they truly, truly feel in themselves that they're going to become. And then it's almost like sometimes in those meditations that you provided, and some of the ones that I write, people do be like, oh my God, I know it. I know what I want to do. This is my purpose. This is my essence. But then there's also this block, right? this block of, oh, I can't do that, or belief systems that we already have, or what you describe in the book as the shadow self. Or so there's a few things that you did describe in the book that will help you, sort of uncover these blocks. So for anyone who feels like they've got a purpose, feels like they've got something inside them, but is just held back by, I suppose, their ego and the real life society of judgment, really.
Yeah, 100% Sinead. So you've seen it in your practice, when there are two things there. So it's that manifestation burnout. And what I really wanted to say with this is it's sort of take your manifestation deeper, because there is and I talk about that in the book. There's a ceiling to manifesting from a place of, where you kind of haven't you haven't taken that deep dive really into the shadow and explored really the patterns and the voices inside. So you can manifest, and you will manifest from the mind. You can do that, and great things will happen. But then there is this sort of, we start to coast, because ultimately our hearts are calling us home, right? Ultimately, this lifetime is about really understanding who you are in a deep way. Like, who am I in a deep way? Like getting in contact with that deep part of you, because that's your gold. So, but when the invitation can be to, maybe step into that, all of those thoughts could come rushing in. They literally, it's like a ping pong machine in there, and it goes round and round and round. And the minute someone leaves a session, it's that thing of like, oh, I can't do that. Or, you get them to a place and it's like, but that's not really, yeah, but can I, but is that like I, is that really me? Is that possible? And so with these chapters, and in the middle part, it was always a book of three parts. It's the softening, it's the alchemizing, and then it's the return. But with the alchemizing, you get in there, and we get in there in a really robust way, really dynamic way. We get into the shadow, we look at the old stories, and we unblock. We just get in and find the blocks and block them and unblock them, because that is really my work. My work is quite dynamic like that. Like for me, it's about getting people over the line, and let's just do this. It's not sort of let's look at this and turn it around and think about it and talk about it and understand it intellectually. It's like, let's embody and let's let go. Like, we can do that. And when we step into the heart, like you've seen, it sort of happens. It really is because of the powerhouse of the electromagnetic field of the heart. What the heart is really about is actually, it's a treasure trove. So if you can start your meditations by dropping into your heart, when we meet the shadow, when we meet our shame wound, when we find our inner child, we do that inner child work, it moves quickly. And that's ultimately what my work is about. It's there's a gentle pace, because it's always gentle, because heart work is about compassion, it's about love. So it has that gentleness, it holds you in such a safe way. But it also moves, you can feel the shifts happening, just like you mentioned yourself.
Yeah, and removing blocks is like one of the major parts. And I have an app where, I have all my meditations on there, and I have courses as well, but also like with the app, right? And then we have different sections. So like we've obviously got manifesting and visualization, which is our like most popular section, but like the most important section after that section is removing blocks, which is the section that never gets as much attention,
Right,
because people don't want to go in there,
right.
because they just see it, don't they? They see the words removing blocks, when in fact part of your manifesting journey is, clarity. You're manifesting, you're finding who you truly are. Then you go to your removing blocks, and people don't really want to go in there, I suppose, as much. That's why I have to bring them into the courses, so they automatically come into people. But what would you say, like in your practice, would be like the most common block that people have in their manifesting their true essence?
Well, listen, we're kind of, like I said, we think that we are alone with our thoughts, and that we're the only ones that feel these really dark thoughts, or really awful, we say awful things to ourselves. We think we're the only ones. But actually, when I see 8 people a day, and you can put those people side by side from, like I said, all different walks of life, and we all have the same thing, which is this. Really, it's about our shame. It's about, and what is shame? It's this thing of, you can't do that. Who do you think you are doing that?
Yeah.
And it's also sometimes in a deeper way, people really feel bad about themselves. Like I feel bad. Like we've learned it's maybe something's happened to you over time, and you've learned that I'm a bad person rather than the thing I did wasn't great. Like we really like to berate ourselves and give ourselves a really hard time about just not being enough, which is what the shame wound is, right? So I'm just not, it's ultimately boils down to I'm not lovable, I'm not enough. And that's what we are shifting. And that's to get the show on the road, and we get the show on the road in the true essence process, and it's shifting that belief system in whatever way that shows up for you.
Yeah. And like as you said, removing shame as well. It's something that I work on as well. And what I notice when people are trying to remove shame is that again they do have those stories like, oh, I once stole or I once cheated or I once whatever. But when you actually go back and look why you did those things. Like I cheated because I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel good enough. I lied because I didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. I stole something because I wanted everyone to like me. It's all comes down to like your inner child wanting to be loved and cared for. So then that compassion is so important to melt away that shame. And it really does help people like really get into there because they think, you know, how can I manifest my true essence whenever I've done all these bad things? But when you look at the bad things, it's usually because of an insecurity of not feeling good enough. And then, like, eventually those things melt away the shame and allow you to step into what you truly fully deserve, I guess, which is
So
important.
right, Sinead. That's basically what it's about. It's our inner child, and as children, when we're young, we're also, if we've grown up in what I call either an emotion phobic household, or mum, hasn't been able to hold emotions, or dad's been absent. What we do with our emotions is they internalize. So we have feelings, but if our environment doesn't allow us to feel, then those feelings, whatever they are, become something that are bad, right? So we push them down, and those feelings, actually just get pushed into our shadow. So often, whatever it is, and it may be an emotion phobic environment, or I stole one of those little things, and that's what I'm saying about thinking about what is the why, what led you to do those things, like cheating. So people, think about, I'm such a bad person, I cheated, or I'm such a bad, I hear all sorts of different stories around that, and how we have to forgive ourselves, and like why it's so important to forgive. And that's also a chapter in the book of forgiveness of other people, but mostly it's of ourselves. And that's so how you've described that is really, that's the work, isn't it? That bringing compassion to, and melting these the shame, and then the barriers, and then the armor, and the walls that we build against the world to protect ourselves from the world knowing us. Because if the world could see into us, the world wouldn't like what they saw. So that's why, intimacy, into me see, we really protect ourselves from intimacy. But often, for all of these reasons, when we come to our true essence, we anchor into our true essence. That is unapologetic. So when we're unapologetic, we no longer need to people please. We can start to speak our truth. We're really okay with boundaries. We really go after what we want. We really start dreaming into our visioning into our dreams in a really powerful and profound way. And we start to say, it's okay for me to give myself a bit of space. I'm going to give myself a bit of room in my day, rather than everyone else being more important than me. It's okay, it's safe for me to put myself first, or it's safe for me to love myself,
Yeah.
and show up in the world more.
Yeah. I think that also comes with age, don't you think? Like, I feel like in your 20s, you don't do any of that. And then you come into your 30s, and then you're just like, you set all these boundaries, and then you feel like, and one of the things that I always learned as well is that I always thought like I am a very much a people pleaser, but um, is that is a lack of self love if you don't put your boundaries down. And that really made me really think about it because I was like, oh no, I don't want to annoy anyone and whatever. But like I am, you know, going against myself if I am not putting down those boundaries. That's obviously going to lead me to my true essence as well. But I also wanted to touch on inner child, like you did say there, because a lot of people on this podcast, I don't know if they may have heard of inner child, like I have inner child meditations and stuff like that. But like I was first introduced to inner child when I first started therapy, and I remember being really taken back by it for the first few experiences. Like the therapist getting me to talk to my inner child, like I really didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. Like, so I just felt really uncomfortable, you know? So I just felt like, but over time, when I started to delve into it a little bit deeper, everything just made so much sense. And how would you describe that inner child work to someone who has never experienced it before?
Well, I did a mind body spirit festival on the weekend and bank holiday weekend in here in the UK, and I did a big sort of work. It wasn't actually that long. It was a meditation, and then we sort of had an inner child rave at the end because I sort of got us all dancing, and that was great. But there was a woman in the crowd who was probably in her 60s and had never met her inner child, and she was in floods of tears. And I see people of all ages, so yeah, like 20 in their 20s, but up to 75. And sometimes, so the people who haven't met their inner child, at some point you'll have to meet your inner child. Okay. It can feel quite overwhelming to meet your inner child because in our 20s we're still quite enmeshed with our inner child. So really what the work is about growing your compassionate, healed and healing adult self. And that adult self can hold the inner child and the inner child's experiences safe. But often in our 20s, it's like the inner child's just, ruling the roost. And that can happen all the way through. So I've seen people in their 30s who go to work and they've had really big jobs, but they can't speak up. They've gone to university, they're really proficient and effective in their jobs, but they get into a sort of managerial situation in a meeting and they just can't speak up and speak because they're little girls in the room. They're kind of terrified. They're back into their 6-year-old and how it felt when they were 6 and they were bullied at school, or how they felt when the teacher said you're dyslexic, or they couldn't concentrate, or something was happening for them and they're carrying that. So often, if we've had, been a little bit ADHD at school, or we've had difficulties at school, that's a big one in the world, because that will always haunt us. But our inner child also carrying the stories of our childhoods, whatever the childhood has looked like at home, that little girl or boy has absorbed these stories at a cellular level. So when we go back and hold them safe, and we go back to find them, and I always say that to someone in a first session, I say to them, I'm here for your inner child. I'm not really here for you. Like, you can do what you like. Because often people be like, I'm fine. I don't know. Like, it's fine. I'm fine. For me, fine means effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, right? So it's like, it's those, the minute someone says that, it's like, that's the kind of the red flag. And I always say, I'm here for your inner child because I can feel your inner child. The minute I open the door, I can feel the 3-year-old self, like by holding on, like hoping that at some point this person will let them speak up, and will create a safe space for them to speak their story. Because what we love to do is we love to really minimize the story. We love to say, well, it was just this, or oh, it was just that, or oh, it's okay, or it was fine, or that, But sometimes our inner child just needs us to say, wow, that was really hard. And I really see you, and you was really courageous. And I see you and I feel you and I've got you.
Yeah. And like every time I go back to my inner child as well, I always find it a very different experience. Like the first few experiences with inner child was just inner child needing hugs the whole time, because in Ireland we're not a very emotional or intimate family set. Like I like Ireland is very like cold, like you'd come home and no one hugs you. It's kind of like, well, how are you?
Yeah.
It's very cold and there's not really much love views and stuff like that. Well, there is now, like, now that I'm older, but back then, so like a lot of my first experiences of inner child was just hugging my inner child
Yeah.
for and like it was just like, what do you need? And she just needed to be hugged and hugged and hugged. And I thought, is this what's going to happen every time I go back? It's like hug, hug, hug. But I did experience some different experiences with your meditations and seeing a very different side to my inner child. So it is nice to know that, like, the more you go back and you can have like these little conversations with her, you can get like different experiences every single time to help you towards your true essence and to heal yourself. Because again, once we see ourselves as young and innocent and taking in all these stories that we took in from society and our elders, it's just crazy because it can really just melt away some of those belief systems that we really, really hold. And I advise anyone listening to the podcast to even try any inner child meditation. I always find the best ones are the ones that surprise you with inner
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
I try to do that in my own meditations. Like we'll have a very different name, but inner child just comes in and just has a little conversation or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find it's such a powerful way to get to your true essence. But people are a little scared of going in there.
Yes.
But it's very powerful as well for me, for sure. And again, I would love to ask you as well, like in the book, like a lot of the book is people telling their experience working with you, and which is obviously really enjoyable for us to read and see all these different transformations through the work that you do through your retreats and stuff like that. Is there any particular transformation for you that stuck out that you'll forever remember?
Wow. Well, I'm always so humbled every time I see a transformation and a shift, and I call these transformations everyday miracles, and because that's what they are. So if you are a person who, feels really frightened to go outside, or is really, it feels really nervous in big groups, or and that shifts, that's an everyday miracle. So I've seen something like that happen, but I've also seen some, someone who's shifted, childhood abuse and had a very different life, and turned that there's a story of that in the book, turn that into something so positive that she can talk about, that she's now, she basically wrote about that and got into an amazing college in America, and that's, she's advocating for women, and she's turned these, our traumas into wisdom, because that's what they are. So, but I see these things, whether it's someone who has, gone from not being able to, get a job, and they've started their own business, and it's done so incredibly, it's just done incredibly well because they've tuned into their true essence, really allowed, surrendered to their purpose, and just allow themselves to step in. These are everyday miracles, whether it's in work, whether it's sort of socially, or in relationship, that really manifest your true essence. That's what it's all about. So, and every time I kind of witness a shift, it just, it literally, it's why I do this work.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things I would say, and probably your clients as well, is that people's trying to move through judgment to get where they are. And I feel like that is just probably one of the major blocks that I have as well, like from Ireland and stuff. Like there's always this like sort of judgment on you, especially if you're in the spiritual world. And like sometimes I keep my spiritual beliefs to myself so much,
Yeah,
but like I keep, you know what I mean, but I always feel like there's this judgment as well when we're going for our goals.
absolutely.
And what would be your best advice for anyone who's trying to go and get their true essence to move through their judgment?
Do you know how many Irish people I see? I see so many Irish people. I've got some sort of karmic, like people come from Ireland to see me, and I mean, I actually love Ireland and I love the Irish. So, but it's interesting when you talk about judgment. Yeah, like how do we move through that inner critic and that judgment that we've internalized? Because remember, you've internalized all of these ideas. They're not your ideas. Okay, this is society's ideas, this is your parents, this is ancestral, it's been handed down ancestrally. But again, remember, like part of the thing that we do in the book is we see our parents as small children of small children of small children, unloved children of unloved children, judged children of judged children, right? And I think a lot of the people listening to this podcast would probably be sort of natural born empaths as well, because, that's, even when you're on a journey of manifestation, you're on a journey of awakening and feeling and listening, and feeling into the world in a slightly different way. But what I'd say in terms of judgment is recognizing where you end and the world begins. Okay, this is a boundary piece. Okay, and it's the line in the sand where you end and the world begins. This judgment, recognize that this judgment is not coming from you. Okay, so you're going to step into your heart. You're going to build it's like a bicep, building the compassion arm, more and more compassion for yourself every day. You can step into the heart and just ask your heart, how are you feeling? What do you need? And that just builds your true essence. But then as you're doing that, you're also growing that boundary where you begin and where you end and they begin. So because it's not your stuff, right? Know what is yours. That's the really biggest thing about judgment. Know what is belongs to you, know what you've internalized, and know what belongs to the world. Because ultimately we don't want to live the world, we don't want to live the life that the world thinks we should live. We want to live the life that we want to live.
Yeah, and we know that deep down as well.
Deep, deep down, we know, okay? And even if you're racked by shame and racked by low self-esteem, because many of us are, right? It's really natural. It's really you're not alone. Even when that's happening, there is a part of you that feels like life could be different. And even when you've given up hope, it's that where it feels hopeless. There's this thing of like, well, there's this slither of light of like life could be different. It's like something like almost like haunting you, or like an echo of like, it's like a door banging on its frame, bringing you back home. Wherever you are on that journey, you have a right to live the life that you were born for, and there is a life that you were born for, and it's beyond all of those judgments and ideas that you have absorbed from the world. It's more than that. Okay, but we take that in, we wake up to that, what we've actually been, how we've been conditioned and brainwashed, and what doesn't belong to us, and we return to this bright spark of who we are, because we're just a bright spark, and there's something that is waiting for you. There's a path that is waiting for you to show up to it. It's waiting for you to bring it to the world. The world needs you to be all that you are, because there are people out there that are waiting for you, even though you don't know that yet, right? So that's really why we return to our true essence, because there's work to be done and you're meant to be doing it.
Yeah. And I've just finished, like, I was researching a talk on female empowerment and how females have just only started coming into this realm, because for years they were kind of more staying in what society wanted for them. And I do you feel like there is definitely a difference of in your clients in terms of male and females, that females take a lot more time to believe they deserve like their true power? Because I've definitely noticed that women have always just, as in Ireland and maybe in England as well, but they just kind of step back for a very long period of time just because of everything, like because of patriarchy and all the things. But recently, it's time for us to kind of step into our power, because we really are, we need to be at the forefront of decision making in the world and everything. But it's just time for women to just step into their power a little bit more and believe that they can have the life that they deserve. I definitely feel like through my research and through everything, it's been that women don't believe that they deserve it as much as what a man would believe that he deserves it.
Absolutely. I mean, what it is a non-negotiable for the planet and also for the survival of the planet, that women are at the forefront of making co-creating this world, and but the choices and in politics and all areas of our lives, because the planet needs our energy. It needs our input. It needs us to be claiming our power without a shadow of a doubt, because we're in a we're in strange times, so we need this to happen. And it's the rise of the divine feminine. The divine feminine is a massive part of my work, and the energy of the divine feminine, and whatever that feels like for you, the face of the divine feminine. There are many faces of the divine feminine, and we can kind of work with aspects of the divine feminine spiritually, or you can kind of bring that sort of energy in, can really help with your healing work. So just like you'd bring in the angels, or you'd bring in your guides, or you'd bring in your ancestors, the divine feminine, the rise of the divine feminine in ourselves, this real power, like allowing this power to move through you. And when we think of the divine feminine, we can think of it as maybe sort of a really soft and like what is compassion, but compassion is strength. Compassion is, to be really compassionate, you have to be so courageous, because when we think about bringing compassion to all of those things that we say to ourselves that are really mean and hard and so tough, we're so tough on ourselves, to bring compassion has to show up with that same amount of power, right, to neutralize that energy. And so when we're in our divine feminine energy, like we are warrior, we're kind of in our real sort of warrioress powerful vibration.
Yeah. And I like what I was saying in my speech the other day was just like, if women were more involved in decision making and they were showing up that like as their true selves, like the world would be a very different place right now.
Oh wow. Well, we wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah. Like women have
Simply,
so much, and I just feel like they should be at the forefront. They should be, they're designed to create, to thrive. They're designed to be there at the top and collaborate with everyone in the world. But for so long they have been pushed down. But it's time for us to rise and get our true essence. And like your book is a great way to help get there as well. And even to just finish up today, like what advice would you give to someone who's just beginning this work and they just really want to find, they have this inkling, like I think when people listen to this podcast or anything, they do have this inkling of their soul purpose, like it's inside them, it's shouting from them, but they just don't know which way to go and how to get there and how to begin that process.
I always say, because every single, I say, get out of the head, get into the heart, and stay curious, right? And see what happens, because that really is the tagline. With sort of, I suppose, shifting consciousness one heart at a time, and what that really, that for me, the next revolution is the revolution of the heart. Because like you say, if women were a massive part of decision making, we wouldn't be where we are in the world today. And that is a fact. That's just real, because that's not how we operate. So mostly. So for me, it's about coming into your heart. Just spend a couple of minutes every day, or just a minute, hands on heart, two hands on your heart, taking a nice deep breath, heart embodied breath into the heart, and exhaling through, and sit there for a few moments, just aligning with your heart energy, just allowing that frequency to really start to sort of be in the body, and ask yourself, how are you feeling? What do you need? Just ask yourself that, and keep a little heart diary. That's the simplest thing to do,
Yeah.
and it works.
Yeah. Okay, one more question before I go, I promise. Obviously you're a big meditator. You said you meditated since you have been 7 years old, and I
Yeah.
would love to know what meditation means to you and your practice throughout the years. Like this podcast is very big meditators, and I am a big meditator, and sometimes I just love to hear other people's stories, so I'd love to hear yours.
Well, first and foremostly, to all the meditators out there and would-be meditators, if you're listening and you haven't quite put a toe in yet, we love you. I love you. I love all of the meditators out there, because when I started meditating in the 70s, it was really wackadoodle, right? And
Yeah.
I was 7 years old, and I was living in East London, and my mum, who'd become a meditator in the 60s, because she was a bit of a sort of, she was a seeker and a hippie in the 60s. But I learned the transcendental meditation, which is a mantra-based meditation, when I was 7, and I've been meditating ever since, and it really saved me. When we think about, because I grew up with a single parent family, and with a whole trunk load of stuff, from my own experience, growing up with mum and her ancestral stories. I had to negotiate that, which is why I do the work I do, and it's in the book too. But the meditating really helped me self-regulate my nervous system, and it also really helped. It just, in terms of like my path and my purpose, when I knew I wanted to be a TV presenter, and I write about that in the book. And there was not a hope in hell of me becoming a TV presenter. Like nothing about me at that time could have even brought that into my reality. But I sort of put it on my screen, and because meditation had really taught me about that, how to rise above your thoughts, right? How to be more than your thoughts. So the thoughts that were saying, you can't do that. Like, how are you going to do that? And I just kind of showed up to it. I was just meditating, and I just visioned it in. And I got my first job at the BBC as a children's presenter. And then I became a radio host on with a world service, and I had a hip hop show, and I did all sorts of things. But really, through my meditation practice, it really helped me move beyond the mind. Since then, obviously, I do a lot of visualization. I started a full moon. I also 25 years ago now, or even maybe more, like 30 years ago, I started the moon, started doing moon meditations. I started my house. I'd have like 6 people or 2 people or 15 people. And it was just a wonderful way to come together. But also at a time when the full moon, doing full moon meditations or new moon meditations was not cool, right? It was out there. But when we create these pockets of sacred space, and that's really why I say to people to do new moon meditations and full moon meditations, is you're creating a little pocket of the sacred within your month, and you're returning. It's about the return, because really what we've lost in our societies are, we've lost the way to return to ourselves every day, and that's how we lose ourselves. So we abandon ourselves and lose ourselves, and we get caught in that whirlwind, which is why doing 5-minute meditation in the morning, or 10 minutes at night, or walking in nature, it, whatever it is a return daily, because our rituals are so important. But yeah, I mean, for me, meditation, and I say this to people having learnt TM, but, and kind of doing my own version really of what, that's a Vedantic meditation. It's built, it's a sort of, it's most mantra-based meditations are just based, that's what TM is really. But I also say to people, you can meditate by gardening, you can meditate, it's about meditative, it's about shifting the brain waves. We shift from beta to theta and alpha, but you can do that walking, you can rewire the brain walking in the woods. And we know that now. So there are different ways to do that, but showing up to a meditation practice is a ritual, and it's so powerful. It's, it really, that is an anchor. And so I love it. And so, and what we do as meditators is we do shift frequency. When we're meditating, we shift the frequency. It's a ripple effect. So there's so much research out there right now that proves that, as we've spoken about heart meditation, you can feel that it's an electromagnetic field when you meditate on the heart. But also just any meditating you're doing, you're changing your own frequency, and that shifts the frequency of your family, of your friends, of people that you're in relationships with at work. Like, you are doing that, and it's an incredible gift that you are embodying right here, right now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll leave it there for today. I just want to say a thank you so much for coming on today, and just let everyone know where they can find you and your book.
Yeah, so Manifest Your True Essence, you can find that actually in Australia, that in the W stores. You apparently, they've bought a whole load in there, and it's also it's on Amazon. I'm Estelle Bingham, Estelle.Bingham on Instagram, so come and find me there, or estellebingham.com, my website.
Perfect. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on, and I hope you have a great day, and I hope the dogs are okay in there. They're all calm and relaxed.
Well, they are now. They're like Sinead. They were like trying to get into the room. I've had such a lovely time. What a wonderful podcast, Sinead. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.